Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Free Thought Podcast. I'm your co host, Amelia Boudreau.
And I'm your other co-host, Chad Chow.
And today we are going to be discussing the 2020 election. We will be making predictions, discussing each candidate, and discussing the current state of American politics as a whole.
So what are you thinking about the upcoming election? What's your immediate reaction to it?
When I think about the upcoming election, I think urgency. I think high stakes. I think nervousness because, obviously, Joe Biden is doing very, very well in the polls right now. However, that we can't get too comfortable. We can't have a false sense of security because because things aren't sorted out yet.
Yeah, it could be a repeat of 2016 where
exactly.
Hillary pulled ahead in the polls, but during the election, the tables were turned.
Yeah, exactly, and especially because she even had the popular vote, and yet Trump still won. So it's nerve-wracking, and I think that it's just I'm just very nervous about it. But I think we should just get to discussing the candidates and their policies because that's where we're really going to get into sort of a debate almost. It's uncertain. Yeah. I think we agree on most, but I think that there's a lot to discuss and compare the candidates on each issue.
Yeah, of course. So let's talk about the policies and what these two candidates support first. What are some of Biden's policies you have thoughts on, Amelia?
So I think that I actually really like Biden as a politician and in terms of his policies. Obviously, he has a lot of flaws as a person. However, I'm not disappointed with his policies at all. Some of my favorites are he has a really strong climate change plan. He plans to eliminate carbon emissions by 2050. And also he supports the Green New Deal. He also wants to eliminate private prisons, which is good because they contribute to a lot of mass incarceration. He wants to have stricter gun control laws. He wants to give health care to 96% of Americans. It's not Medicare for all, but it's better than better than nothing. Those are just a few policies that I actually really, really like. How about you, Chad?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between Trump and Biden's policy would be the fact that Biden's actually addressing climate change, whereas Trump is calling it a democratic hoax. I do think that it is a little on the pricey side, but I think it is required to stop the detrimental consequences of climate change.
The approximate cost of it is very expensive. You're correct. It's about $1.7 trillion for the plan, and he also supports the even more expensive Green New Deal. However, my view on that is if we're going to be putting money anywhere, let's put it into the future of this planet. So I think I have less concerns about the plans than you do from what I've heard you say. And I understand these are extremely lofty prices.
Yeah. And this $1.7 trillion would be used over the course of 10 years. So it's not like we're going to use $1.7 trillion in 1 year. It's over the course of 10 years.
True. And I think that might be the numbers might be the conflict that a lot of more right-leaning or Trump supporting people have. That might be the conflict they have with the plan. Because on the right, I just, not generalize, but I see a pattern of people being very concerned about their taxpayer dollars and stuff like that. But I think it's important to recognize that this is such a pressing issue, and the UN estimates that we have about 10 years until the effects of climate change become irreversible. So I see it as a matter of urgency. Of course, this is not what we want to do. We don't want to. This is not a plan that we want to have to make, but it is necessary.
Yeah. But sometimes, of course, there are people who don't believe that climate change is real and stuff like that. And that's definitely going to have an effect.
It's just so stupid. But we can get into that another time.
Yeah. But on the UN thing you brought up where they say, you have 10 years, I do want to say that in 2000 or 2001, there was this guy named Dr. Brown. He was also a part of the UN, and he said that by 2020, like we're saying now, by 2020, the climate change effects would be irreversible. But as we can see, we're still here. it has definitely gotten worse, but I don't
Well,
like.
yeah, I get
Yeah,
what you're
I'm just
saying
giving
here.
the other side of the argument, you know.
Well, yeah, I do see what you're saying. To make 2 points about that, one, yeah, we're still here, but that irreversible doesn't mean that we're going to be wiped out. It just means that
Yeah,
that we have less hope of turning all of this around. And
yeah, of
two,
course.
like, yeah, science gets more specific over time.
Hmm.
Honestly, 2020 isn't a bad prediction because
Yeah,
obviously now they're saying 10 more years. However, what's 10 more years in comparison to their first prediction? It's not that
yeah,
far off, you know?
exactly.
So they're getting more specific.
Yeah,
That's essentially all we have to say about climate change is that Trump has not only called it a democratic hoax and said, quote, I don't believe it, but he's also withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. He's withdrawn from the clean power, I believe it's called the Clean Power Energy Plan, something like that, which was one of the first big actions that the U.S. took to counteract the effects of greenhouse gases.
mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, to conclude, Trump has not only ignored it, but he also has done things to make it worse, like withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, the other thing I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Biden, Chad, why don't you summarize Biden's plan?
So, first and foremost, Biden actually believes in these scientists, and he believes that climate change is real. He supports the Green New Deal, and he has a plan to eliminate carbon emissions by 2050. And he also has a $1.7 trillion climate change plan that takes place over the course of 10 years.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's enough on climate change. Let's move to the next issue. I think we both have come to the conclusion that Biden pulls ahead of Trump in that respect.
Yeah.
So the next issue I think we should discuss is something that's very relevant right now. It's the issue of mass incarceration, the police, the corruption in the system, all of the things that Black Lives Matter is really advocating for. And I think to summarize Biden's side of it, Biden wants to eliminate private prisons, which is great because they contribute to a lot of mass incarceration. He wants to decriminalize marijuana and expunge all people who are facing time right now for marijuana offenses. And he wants to legalize it for medical use as well, which is great, not only because that's one of the things that disproportionately affects people of color because of over-policing and all of these things, but also because it shouldn't be illegal, and it's one of the biggest things that contributes to our massively overfilled prison systems. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah. I think you summed it up pretty well there, but you did miss out on one important thing. Biden does want to eliminate cash bail. And his campaign states that the end of cash bail is supposed to make the system fairer for poorer people who are far more likely to get stuck in jail while awaiting trial. That makes them more likely to lose their jobs and to plead guilty, even if they are innocent, experts say. Many borrow bail money from bondsmen and then end up in debt. Wealthier people, meanwhile, can buy their way out of pre-trial detention on just about any charge, from shoplifting to murder. And so I think that sums up the problem with cash bail pretty well. But in New York, they have also eliminated cash bail. In a more recent incident, there was a woman named Tiffany Harris who was arrested after she was alleged to hit 3 Jewish people. And then she was let go because of the elimination of cash bail. And then the next day, she was accused of an assault of another woman. And so this just shows that you arrest someone and then you just let them go and then they commit another crime. But of course, there are those people that don't commit crimes. They're let go and then they don't commit crimes. Almost all the people who support ending cash bail agrees that there needs to be some sort of reform, some sort of change. And what's going on in New York should not happen. There should be a change or a reform to it. I just want to give some statistics. New York's total homicides went up 24%. The Upper East Side robberies jumped 286%. The mayor of New York says that all these are happening because of COVID, Black Lives Matter, and the killing of George Floyd, etc. I also want to point out that the homicide rate throughout the country has gone up In Austin, it's approximately 56%, much higher than New York. I just wanted to give like the full statistic, you know?
Yeah, no. So to address your point about cash bail, I think that's a really complex thing because the institution of or the idea of giving bail has some classist side effects in a way. At times, it cash bail and that institution can be very classist towards people, which I think is the problem that Joe Biden and a lot of other officials are addressing. So I think that's definitely I don't know, it's multifaceted and it's complex. However, to address your point about defunding the police and how that played out in New York, I worry because I think that of all places to start by defunding the police, New York City was not the place. I'm not against defunding the police. However, I do think that it needs to be done properly, and it sounds like starting off by doing it in New York City wasn't effective, which sucks because what really needed to happen was it needed to happen well in one city to show the rest of the country that it could work. So it sucks that it's going to be both, like, it's going to have detrimental consequences, but it's also going to set a bad example. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to make people way more reluctant to engage in police reform. Also, I've done a little bit of research on the rest of his ideas about the police, and he wants to reform them. He doesn't want to defund. He wants to reform by committing $300 million to the community-oriented policing services, which is essentially a organization that works on police reform, making it more fair, removing the corrupt aspects of it, which is good. I mean, which is great, actually. And then I think one thing that I forgot to bring up earlier is that he wants to eliminate the death penalty.
I just want to go back to what we were talking about before. There was another man named Darius Sutton. He was a gang member who was released from custody without cash bail in New York, who was charged with attempted murder, and then he went on to commit 3 more shootings.
So that's like an anecdote that you're using to say why you're anti-elimination of cash bail?
I mean, I think, like you said before, there are definitely a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of problems with our criminal justice program that should be reformed. But I just wanted to point out another example that the way New York City is handling cash bail should be reformed.
I agree. I think that that we've seen that, at least in certain places. I mean, I actually don't think that it's been done in other states yet, but at least in places like New York City, we cannot have a complete removal of a lot of the institutions that our justice system has. However, I think both sides of the spectrum are wrong. Completely removing it, obviously, from the things that you brought up that I wasn't actually aware of, isn't effective, at least not positively effective. However, keeping everything as it is, as we've seen, is also problematic. I think that you have to find a very important balance in terms of criminal justice reform.
But finding that balance
I don't know if we've
difficult.
done that yet. Yeah,
it's very difficult. So I've also heard that Biden has had a racist past. What are your stances about that?
Yeah, that's a problem, and it's something that is leading to a lot of it's hurting his campaign greatly. He supported the 1994 crime bill, which led to mass incarceration and stuff like that, and systemic racism in general. And he's also obviously said some racially charged things in the past, which obviously no one condones. No, I want to make it clear, no one condones racism. However, when one says we have to settle for Biden or we have to vote Biden, we're not saying that because Biden is not racist. Like, we acknowledge that both candidates are bad people. I mean, at least that's my stance on it, but I'm not trying to generalize. I'll speak for myself only. I don't think that Biden I think that he's proved himself to be problematic in some ways. However, the reason I personally support Biden for the 2020 presidency is because if we're measuring him in comparison to Trump, he's nowhere near as bad. And B, his policies are just so much better. Trump is both a bad person and a bad politician, whereas I think Biden is a bad person, yet I support him as a politician, if that makes any sense. So, he has said and done racist things in the past. However, if we're comparing pasts, like he's just doesn't stand anywhere close to the amount of racism that Trump has engaged in, and also because we have to. I mean, I think a lot of us have pretty much accepted that the candidates this year are not optimal. Both of them, neither of them are. So you got to look at what's best for the future, and at a certain point, say, yeah, his racist past isn't okay, but we're thinking future right now.
Yeah, I think you should take into consideration their past, but you should ultimately make the decision based on their policies and what they want to do. Moving along, we're going to change topics and we're going to talk about Biden's immigration plan. Biden, on his website, he says that he will ultimately begin working with Congress to modernize our system, the immigration system, with a priority on keeping families together by providing a roadmap to citizenship for nearly 11 million undocumented immigrants. And so essentially what Biden wants to do is he wants to grant citizenship to 11 million illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants, as he puts it.
And to compare it to Trump is obviously one of the biggest parts of his 2016 campaign was his promise to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. And then obviously, he actually never ended up doing that. He asked for money from Congress to do it, and he only built 3 miles of it. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So that never happened. But also, but I'm glad because I didn't support it in the first place. But what he has been doing for border control is essentially the camps on the border, which I think we can agree on. They're treating people inhumanely. They're splitting up families. I've heard that there's a lot of sexual assault going on between the officers there and the children. It's just it's awful that it's happening. So let's start off. I want to hear what you, Chad, have to say. Like, what is your stance comparing both candidates on immigration, and what do you think of what each of them are planning to do?
I could go into what Biden wants to do. Like I said before, he wants to grant citizenship to 11 million illegal immigrants. And in the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force recommendations document, they said that by shutting people out and closing the door on these immigrants, this is essentially against the values of America. And it's not a good representation of American values. And this is why the Biden is committed to building a 21st century immigration system that reflects our values. Now, I just want to dive into this a little deeper. When we think of our values, what are a couple things that come to mind? One thing that comes to my mind is equality. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I just want to ask a rhetorical question. How would letting 11 million illegal immigrants become legal immigrants with essentially a snap of a finger be equal or fair at all? I just want to raise that point.
So do you want to hear my answer to that?
Yeah, sure.
Here's my stance on the immigration system and your question in some regard. I think that frequently people make the mistake of saying, "Oh, they're committing a crime. They are the problem here."
Yeah. I'm not saying that they're the problem. I'm just saying.
No. I'm just talking in general. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, don't worry. But essentially, I've had conversations with people who are supporters of Trump and especially Trump's immigration plans, and to that, and I have a problem with people who say. Who seem to blame the immigrants completely. Because with any crime, really, you have to understand what causes people to commit crime. There are certain set of conditions that lead to every crime, really. I hate to generalize, but a lot of crimes, there are things that lead to them, and there are reasons that people commit crimes. And I think one of the biggest reasons that people often revert to immigrating here illegally is because of the broken system. The system can take years. You can be denied countless times. And some people simply don't have years. They're fleeing from places that their safety is in jeopardy. And so I think that to blame only the immigrants for coming here illegally, when there's clearly a problem with the system itself, is negligent of the actual problems in our country. So I would say that, yeah, I think that it's absolutely necessary to help the 11 million, that's the number you cited, the 11 million immigrants who are here illegally become legal, because everyone has a right to a better place to live. Everyone has a right to the opportunities that America offers. So I think that in terms of putting it in terms of fair, I would say that it's not a matter of fair. I would say that comparing illegal immigrants getting to, as you said, instantly become legal to the immigrants that came here legally, like through the long process, isn't a fair comparison, because everyone comes from different backgrounds. And so great, if someone was able to immigrate here legally with the process, that's excellent. However, I don't think that we should be blaming or comparing those who didn't come here legally to those who did. And I think that personally, this is the way I side on it. I think Biden has the exact right idea about immigration, and Trump's rhetoric around immigration has only caused more division and more covert racism against people who come from other countries and against, just people who are foreign to America. So I have a problem with both its effect and it itself, and I am actually strongly in favor of Biden's stance on immigration. Sorry, that was kind of a long way of putting it, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was clear.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think about each plan?
I just wanted to point out that it does take many years to gain citizenship here in the U.S. It all depends. There are many different factors going into it. It depends on your job. Also depends on your country's quota, which is pretty much how many years you need to hold your green card before you can apply for citizenship. And there are around 800,000 people who become naturalized citizens in the U.S. each year, meaning there are 800,000 people who actually become a U.S. citizen each year. And I guess if you do the math at this rate of naturalization, it would take approximately 13 to 14 years to admit these undocumented immigrants here in the U.S. But of course, things could change drastically. So the number of people who do become naturalized could skyrocket or something like that. But I think one of the biggest problems with the immigration that other people think is the fact that you're prioritizing these undocumented immigrants over the law-abiding immigrants, and by doing so, you could be giving off, I guess, the thought that you're almost rewarding these illegal immigrants. Of course, I don't think I'm not in support of that.
That's not what you believe, but you're just saying that that's what people may believe.
Yeah, some people are against this immigration policy because of that thought process. And so these undocumented immigrants should not be punished, but you also shouldn't reward them. Should they not be waiting in line like the rest of the immigrants? Like, I guess what gives them the priority? Why should they get immigration over people who have been waiting years to even get the chance to apply?
You bring up a really good point, and I think it's important to acknowledge that point because it's the belief that so many Americans hold. And so the way I think about it is the reason that people have an objection, sorry, let me rephrase. The problem that a lot of people have, the very problem is illegal immigrants, correct? People coming in and not coming here legally and becoming citizens. That's the problem that we're trying to address. And so I think to have a jealous objection to that and say that it's not fair is actually it's misguided, because the very problem is that we're trying to get people who are here illegally to be here legally. So if you're worried about a matter of fairness, you're simply diverting from the point. And if you truly are in favor of eliminating the problem of illegal immigration, this is something you should support. You should support illegal immigrants becoming legal here. And so I think that while I see the point people bring up around how is it fair, I think the thing that we should be discussing is not fairness. It's how do we eliminate this issue? And we eliminate this issue by helping people who are here illegally become legal residents. And so, yeah, so I hope that was clear. I think that essentially what I'm trying to say is that if one brings up fairness in reference to all of this, the discussion over immigration, they're actually missing the point. It's not about fairness. It's about getting from point A to point B, and point B is legalizing people's residences here.
I just wanted to point out another sort of, I guess, point that someone that's opposed to this could make is the fact that if this does happen, then there are going to be many immigrants or illegal immigrants, new illegal immigrants coming across the border. Because I think this process isn't just going to happen in a month. I think it'll take years. And so I think what the opposition could also make, a point the opposition could also make, is the fact that there could be many new illegal immigrants coming in with the hope that, oh, now I can become a legal immigrant. So what are your thoughts about that point that the opposition can make?
Yeah. So to clarify, what you're saying essentially is like people who are already against, who are like on Trump's side in terms of immigration, could also say, well, this would encourage more people to come here because it's easier to get here.
Yeah. I think that's what they're trying to make.
Yeah, I guess if I heard someone argue that, I would say, and these are all speculations. I haven't looked. I don't know if there's a study proving this or proving them, or this is a speculation on my part. I think people are going to come here regardless, and I think that's a fact. However, so if we can make it so they come here legally rather than illegally, that's a win. I think, like I said, there are people coming into the U.S. So why not make it easier for them to come here legally? I just, I think that the two options aren't keep everyone out versus let everyone in. It's let everyone come here legally or let everyone come here illegally, because even if there is a wall, people will try and come in. And I feel like I'm not articulating my point well. What I'm trying to say is people are, let me rephrase. People are going to come here regardless. So what would we prefer? Would we prefer that they come here legally or illegally? Of course, we would say legally, because that's the very issue we're discussing. We're trying to avoid illegal immigration. So I think saying that more people will come here simply because the process isn't impossible is, again, it exhibits not a full understanding of the very issue. I think the issue is, are people coming here legally or are they not? And the goal is for them to come here legally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess we could switch gears to Biden's economic plan.
Why don't you speak on that? I feel like you know a lot more about that than I do.
Yeah. So a couple of takeaways is he wants to raise the minimum wage to $15 nationwide. He also says that public universities should be free for families earning under $125,000 a year, and that community colleges should be free for all. Yeah, so do you have any thoughts about the minimum wage or the free community or public universities?
Honestly, these are really complex. I think that there are rightfully objections that both sides have to these new plans. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to hear what you have to say first, just because, I don't know, I feel like I need to hear more first.
I also want to make the distinction that a public university would be a university like UMass. Wage would just, raising the minimum wage to $15 would cause various sorts of problems, including the cost of the products that people make. Not necessarily inflation, but just the cost of, yes, inflation could be a possibility, but just the cost of the products that these people are making are going to go up. Like, say you're in a McDonald's and I think they have a dollar menu or something like that, but that dollar menu could change to a $2 or $3 because now the company needs to pay more to their employees, so they need to raise the prices of their products so that they could keep the profit relatively high. There's also the problem that some some people's jobs, some people's minimum wage jobs could be replaced by computers or AI, and could be replaced by machines. And so I think those are two of the two relatively strong arguments of the opposite of the people who are opposed to this economic plan.
Yeah, I understand that. I think to specifically address the minimum wage thing, the minimum wage varies across state, of course. I think in New York it's about $12 currently. Yet it's like a lot cheaper in other states. And so rather than sort of stating my opinion, because honestly I am pretty foggy headed on this whole thing. So rather than state my opinion, I would rather just talk about the pros and cons, and in terms of like the argument for it, which I think is a very valid argument, is that so many people are living in poverty in America, and even if they're not in poverty, they're struggling to make ends meet, things like that.
Yeah.
And especially people who are working minimum wage jobs, of course. And so if we can help them out, I think that's very important. I think that it's important to make sure that we have an America that works for people of all financial classes, if that's even possible. Of course, it's not a thing you can just flick the switch on and create a better America and overnight. It's something that happens incrementally. However, I think it's very important that we work towards that goal. So in that way, that's a good policy in that respect. However, if we're talking about its drawbacks, it's things like higher costs, it's possible inflation over time. So, I think that a lot of Biden policies I have very clear support for. This is something that I definitely see the pro with. I would say I'm probably maybe 60% pro, and I'm like 60% for it, and 40%. I'm not sure. I really don't want to state my opinion on it if I'm not fully educated. I think that's something that I want to avoid. However, I can see the pros and cons. And I definitely see where Biden and Biden supporters are coming from on this. But, like anything, really, it has its drawbacks.
Yeah. And I just also wanted to point out that the right has made many claims that, Joe Biden is a puppet and he's just representing the social democratic people in.
Well, that's just fear mongering.
In politics, but I do want to point out that in the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force recommendations document, here's what they said about the new economy they want to make. Quote, "That is why Democrats commit to forging a new social and economic contract with the American people, a contract that invests in the people and promotes shared prosperity, not one that benefits only big corporations and the wealthiest few, a new contract that recognizes all Americans have a right to quality, affordable healthcare." I think this might have also went into healthcare a bit, but
we talk about healthcare for sure.
Yeah, this could raise some red flags regarding the idea that Biden could be supporting socialists. It's not really sufficient evidence, but it can raise some red flags. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, I think let's talk about that. I think so. To clear any discrepancies up, Bernie Sanders and AOC are not socialists. I mean, they have socialist ideas, or some of them are more like socialist leaning. However, they're not socialists. I think I'm pretty sure Bernie Sanders describes himself as a social democrat or a democratic socialist. I feel like those lines are blurring because a lot of people don't understand what those terms mean. However, it's an important distinction to make. So in terms of that, I think that the whole idea that Biden is a puppet for the quote unquote radical socialists of the Democratic Party is a ploy used by the Trump campaign to demonize these people and make their supporters, who don't actually, a lot of them don't understand what socialism is, anti-Biden. And like, even when we were researching for this episode, I was looking at Trump's website to try and see what his possible policies were for 2020. And the first thing that just it was right in my face on the screen was essentially calling Biden a radical socialist, which he is so far from being a radical socialist. So yeah, I think that like labeling of Biden is it's really just a fear mongering by the right.
Yeah, I've read a lot of articles about this. Most of the right-leaning newspaper or news companies say that, Biden is a socialist and stuff like that. And then I read on The Guardian that they say that this is just, like you said, a tool used by the Trump administration.
Yeah, and in general, if we want to open up the discussion to the other tools used by the Trump campaign and stuff like that, like just recently they published a campaign ad of Biden. I think I casually mentioned this to you before recording this, but they published a picture of Biden where he had his hands on his head in a sort of defeated looking position, where it said defeated, like, and all these words essentially implying that Biden was going to lose and be miserable on November 3rd. And that picture has actually been found that he had a baseball bat in his hands before, or he was praying. I'm not quite sure, but he was doing something, and they edited out the object in his hand to make it look like he was defeated. And that's just comical. The idea that they would lie like that. I just think that the fact that, I know we wanted to avoid being biased, but I think I'm gonna have to. I've already made it clear that I'm very pro Biden in 2020, but I just think that if a campaign is reverting to calling someone a radical socialist when they're so far from it and editing photos of them to make it look like they're sad, that's just such a low blow. And in general, Trump is known for lying.
Yeah. After a little tangent, we'll bring the discussion back to Biden's policies. Another policy he wants to make, I think we touched base on this a little bit, but we could go into a deeper conversation about it, is Biden's plan for healthcare. To give a little background to it, he states that he will make it easier for working families to afford high quality insurance in the Affordable Care Act, marketplaces by ensuring that no one pays more than 8.5% of their income in premiums. So, yeah.
No, so I've also, he wants to expand healthcare coverage to 96% of Americans. Mm-hmm. He's not in favor of Medicare for all, but you know what? 96% is as close as we can get. I'll take it. Yeah, I mean, I will always side with, the idea that healthcare is a human right and that we should expand it, and rich people or wealthy people. I mean, not all people with healthcare are rich. However, they are well off enough to be able to afford healthcare. Yeah. I will always side with the idea that wealthy people are not the only people who deserve healthcare. And so I think, yes, it's expensive. Yeah, like there's no doubting that the idea that more and more people should get healthcare is expensive. However, I think it's an expense we should be willing to pay. I think it's so important in order to create a safe and better society that people have access to healthcare. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I that's something I should feel strongly about.
Yeah, I guess to add a little more background, Democrats will also make available on the marketplace a platinum level federally administered health insurance option with low fees and no deductibilities, so that everyone will have access to this high quality, low cost plan. Low income Americans will be automatically enrolled in this federally administered option at zero cost to them. I think the thing that pops out to me especially is the fact that they want to make a platinum level health insurance, which is, of course, good. But I think some people who might be against this could also make the argument, at least from what I've read, that if this happens, then my health insurance cost will go up. And so I think this is kind of a double-edged sword. If you do already have healthcare, then you're going to be a little bit agitated because your health insurance price is going to go up. But if you're on the other side, then of course you're going to be very grateful and thankful that this exists and that you're able to get health insurance. So I think both sides of the argument, the side that one would stand on, could be based on whether or not they have health care right now, or if they have any morals.
Well, yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Ultimately, it's it's something that motivates, well, not something that motivates most people, something that motivates everyone is self-interest. So, yeah, some people have more to gain from universal healthcare than others. That's just undeniable because people are at varying in varying financial situations. But I think to those people who will not be affected, at least not a lot, by expanding healthcare coverage, like people who already have it. I understand their concerns with cost. However, like in terms of taxes and insurance, we'll take the example of taxes. You already pay for other people's roads, you pay for other people's schools, you pay for other people's museums. That sometimes, not, I mean, obviously not all these museums are funded by taxes, but you get the point. So I think that yes, it's expensive, but at least in my view, I don't want to like try and put my view onto everyone. However, at least in my view, it's a cost that is certainly worth it. That's the way I view it.
To switch gears a bit, I also want to point out that Biden is almost a perfect example of how politics has changed throughout the years. In the 1990s, throughout 2000, he was actually very against criminals, and he wanted to lock a lot of people up. Yeah. And he even said that George Bush was not doing enough to put violent thugs in prison. And in 1993, he warned of predators on our streets. And in 1994, of course, we know that he passed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, which has been a large contributing factor to mass incarceration.
Right. Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off, but that was a complete accident. But yeah, this comes back to what we were talking about earlier about his racist past. It's quite shameful that he ever supported or said these things. And Democrats aren't really excusing this. Again, not to generalize, but it's not something anyone should be excusing, at least, if they aren't already. And I think that, yeah, you have to recognize the awful things that people have done. You have to recognize that people are multidimensional, which obviously that does not excuse it. In no way I'm excusing these things. I mean, it's like I said, it's shameful and awful he ever supported these things. Yeah. However, if we're looking at it relatively, I do think that the ways that he was racist, he's changed a lot. I mean, I know that that's something that people say is very cliched. Oh, well, the candidate has changed. But I seriously do think that, like, he's shown with his policies. We didn't even go into the full extent of his criminal justice policies and his mass incarceration reform policies. But I encourage everyone who's listening to seriously do some research, because the policies that he's proposing now essentially reverse all of the effects of the things that he's supported in the past. And again, relative to Trump, I do think that he is the better candidate in that respect in terms of racism and how racist each of them are, which just sucks. We have to make that comparison, but that's where we are. And so I think that, again, we've talked about it in his racist past, but it's very important that we make the distinction between who someone is in the past and then what they propose in the future. And that we make the distinction between Trump's racism and Biden's racism, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's move along. What predictions do you have about the presidential debates that will most likely occur closer to the election?
Okay, so switching gears, I guess we're going to talk about the debates now. Yeah. I would say that I've seen a lot of the things that conservatives are saying about the debates and their predictions, and they're like, oh, well, Trump's going to crush Biden, blah, blah, blah. He can barely finish his own sentence. Yeah. And, well, yeah, I mean, Biden does have a speech impediment. He's had a stutter since he was 7. That's a known fact. But I don't think that essentially, I think that using that to say that he will be crushed in the debates is a severe underestimation of his abilities. If anyone remembers watching his debates in the Democratic primaries, in the late primaries, when it was basically just him versus Bernie, he obliterated Bernie in the debates. Or maybe obliterated isn't the right word, but he definitely like put himself ahead of him, and it ultimately led to his nomination, of course. And it's pretty well known that Bernie is a good debater. Bernie also does not have a stutter. So I think the fact that he was capable of really distinguishing himself from Bernie and ultimately winning the nomination because of the result of his performance in the debates definitely shows that he's capable of debating. And I think that all too often, clips of him simply stuttering on live TV are circulated or overshared and over-circulated. And the clips of him talking perfectly are hidden or not talked about as much. And there's just this big misconception that he can never talk. And not only is that just not true, but it's also just kind of mean. I mean, I get that presidential races are mean, but like, I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me. But anyways, to try and wrap up what I'm saying I actually have full faith that he'll do well in the debates. I mean, I'm excited to see them. Obviously, don't get too comfortable, but I am very hopeful for what he'll do in the debates. And I think that people need to do more research before they call him like a dementia-ridden old man.
Yeah, I think you summed that up pretty well. There is a fear that they want to move the presidential debate to be earlier because of early voting. I know that's a concern for a couple of people. There's also a concern that Biden hasn't really been debating or talking without a teleprompter too often. So there's also a concern that he might not be really well prepared for this, but based on his, like Amelia said, based on his performance in the Democratic primary debates, he should perform relatively well.
Yeah, no. Can I ask you a question? Can I turn the question back on you? I mean,
yeah,
you can answer this completely unbiased. I'm just asking for literally just a prediction. How do you think? After we talk about the debates, we can actually just talk about the race in general. But how do you think that the debates are going to go if you had to make a prediction?
I honestly think it's going to be a pretty good debate. I definitely think that, yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty entertaining debate. I definitely don't think it's going to be boring at all. And I think it's worth watching.
Do you have any worries?
I mean, I feel like Trump could bring up the fact that, or he could bring up Biden's health problems and stuff like that, and say that he's unfit to lead or something like that. Yeah, I don't think you can really predict what they're going to say or what exactly they're going to do during the debate. I definitely hope it happens because I definitely think it's an important, it's a deciding factor of many voters.
Right. I've actually heard some people saying that this is all just speculation. There will be debates, but some people are saying that they're recommending that Biden does refuse to have a debate until Trump releases his tax returns, which would be very interesting to see if he did that.
I have heard some people make the argument that health officials are advising Biden to not participate in the debate, but Biden's campaign has said that they're totally on board for a debate, and they're just waiting for the Trump administration to actually be on board as much as they are. So right. That's just from what I've read.
Right. If I may add, I have a concern as well to add on to what you said. I'm concerned that that Trump will say a lot of, we'll use fear-mongering language, we'll use hyperboles, or not hyperboles, we'll use exaggerations, I mean, I
also think Biden could also do that, but it might be out of the nature of him.
I think that, but yeah, exactly what you're saying. I think that it's more in Trump's nature to say, oh, he's a radical socialist, oh, he has dementia, oh, he can barely talk, blah, blah, blah. Which is concerning because obviously not everyone believes that, but I think that if it's said frequently enough, if it's said forcefully enough, and if it's said loudly enough, that it will certainly sway people. And I'm concerned about the lies, to be quite frank, the lies that the Trump administration is spreading. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I do remember in the 2016 presidential debate, Hillary was going off about what she believed, and then right when she finished, she said something along the lines of when Trump is in office, he'll do all these things, blah 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 blah. And then Trump just said, "You'll be in jail." And
I remember that too.
That was very
snarky were comments like that earn gasps from the audience that I'm concerned about.
Yeah,
but I think one last question is appropriate for this episode, and that is, and this is not who you want to win, but just I want you to make a prediction about how the election will go. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. What do you predict?
I mean, I think there are a lot of people on Biden's side. I think he appeals to various sorts of people. But there's also the silent majority that was talked about that helped Trump win the 2016 election. I think the silent majority might be less prominent as before because Trump has said some pretty stupid things in the past couple of months that has definitely hurt him. But I don't really know. I think both provide policies that many different people could support.
Yeah, I understand that. Personally, I would say, to answer that question, I would say that obviously right now, Biden is doing very, very well in the polls. Trump had at first a 48% approval rating, then it dropped to the 40s, and now it's in the 30s. I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I am pretty sure I saw that it was in the 30s, which is, I'm sure if I were him, I would be incredibly concerned about that. But obviously you cannot take the polls
too seriously.
I mean, obviously they do give a good indication of what the American people are thinking. However, Hillary was leading the polls in 2016, and we see how that turned out. Yeah. Which is worrying that the polls may not be completely reflective of the truth. But you got to take everything with a grain of salt. But as far as other than the polls, I am extremely happy to see that there are projects like the Lincoln Project, and there are other projects of Republicans grouping together to express their worry for for America if Trump remains in power. And I think it definitely speaks volumes that even people from the Republican Party are rebelling against their party, or not rebelling against their party, but, thinking freely outside of their party and creating things like the Lincoln Project, things that are anti-Trump, yet still Republican. And I think those are very important because Republicans will listen to other Republicans than they will to liberals or Democrats. So I'm very happy to see that he does not have full Republican support. In fact, a lot of Republicans are openly critical of him and his leadership. I would say that that's a very good sign. So then to bring me to the question of who do I think would win if it happened tomorrow, knock on wood, but I honestly think it might be Biden if it happened tomorrow. Unless something seriously goes wrong or changes, I have faith in Biden. Obviously, that does not mean at all that we should get too comfortable. Everyone should go out to vote. Everyone should be campaigning for Biden, or if they can. Everyone should be supporting Biden, I should say. And yeah, I think that while we can have faith, we still need to fight just as hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it also, like with the polls, it is very hard to predict who's going to win, especially the 2016 elections was a huge turn of events. Even Trump himself didn't even think he was going to win until like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. until it was official. He was like, wow, like he didn't expect it at all.
Wait, where'd you hear that? I'm confused.
I forget. I watched way too many videos about the 2016 election, but he was surprised. So I think it is much harder to make predictions in our day and age today.
Right, and Hillary even got the popular vote in 2016. It was due to, if I'm not wrong, the Electoral College that Trump won. We could do a whole episode about the Electoral College, but that is not what we're talking about today. Yeah. There are problems in it, as is very prevalent. Yeah. Very easy to see. However, not the topic for today. But so in any case, what I'm saying is what I think we're both saying is that polls and approval ratings are in some way helpful to see what the American people are thinking. They're unfortunately, you can't take them completely at face value. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. I think that wraps things up.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
Great discussion.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to email us at thefreethoughtpodcast@gmail.com. That's the freethoughtpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you.